Looking to buy, sell, or grow your business to position it for a sale? As the owner and managing partner of Sun Acquisitions, Domenic Rinaldi has personally been involved in over 300 M&A transactions. He has seen and done it all, consulting with large and small businesses across a broad range of industries. On M&A Unplugged, he'll interview buyers, sellers, and their advisors about their experiences scaling, selling, and acquiring businesses. On every episode, you will get key learnings, but most importantly, you will be better prepared for your own acquisition or sale. This is M&A Unplugged with your host, Domenic Rinaldi.
I would like to welcome Scott Becker to the M&A Unplugged podcast. Scott is a partner in the healthcare group at the law firm McGuireWoods. He is also the founder of Becker's Hospital Review and Becker's Healthcare. Scott also happens to be one of the nicest and brightest people that I've ever crossed paths with. His fan club appears to know no boundaries, and that's easy to understand when you experience his unique brand of positivity and energy. He's also started his own podcast, the Becker Group Podcast. Scott, thanks so much for joining me today. It's such a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Domenic. A pleasure to be with you, and I appreciate it greatly. Thank you.
So, could you fill in for the M&A Unplugged podcast community a little bit about your background? You're a lawyer. You also started your own media company. Just give us a little bit more background so people understand the intersection between those two paths.
Certainly, and thank you. So I sort of have straddled two businesses, two careers, really a very long time. I started off as a lawyer. By background, went to Harvard Law School. Don't hold it against me. Started in legal practice literally almost 30 years ago. And the one core concept in legal practice was it was far better to have clients and build a practice than to just be a service partner. And being a service partner is a great, great thing. It just, in the old days, if you didn't have your own clients, you could be treated very poorly. I never wanted to treat anybody poorly, but I wanted to have my own practice, so I had some control over my life. So that was sort of starting the legal practice. As part of getting going in legal practice, and I did this at a large firm, I ended up in a niche, which was the healthcare niche. And in trying to build a brand around healthcare, I started very slowly, very incrementally, building sort of a newsletter and a conference and some other things. And over the years, and there's a whole set of circumstances that led to that effort at marketing my legal practice turned into a much more serious business and a large part of my professional life. And we'll talk about that more as we get going. But the two core careers I've straddled were the practice of law as a healthcare transactional corporate lawyer, and then the media business, which I've now been in for 27 years, which is in hospitals, health systems, health IT, surgery centers, and spine. And we'll talk more about it as we get going.
So, Scott, how did being a lawyer, and I'm going to ask this two ways, but let's start with this first cut. How did your law experience help and or hinder you in starting your own business?
Sure. So it's a great question. When I first really started the media business, it was really an extension of my legal practice and very closely tied to the core niche I was in, which is the ambulatory surgery center niche within sort of healthcare. And to a great extent, for a very long time, it was a great help because we were able to be sort of a content leader around all the different things going on with mergers and acquisitions, regulatory issues, and so forth relating to surgery centers, and sort of built this brand as one of the leading people in the country in terms of knowledge of surgery centers. So for a very, very long time, I would say it was great help to have sort of the background centered in a business that we're doing a media company in.
Makes perfect sense. So let me ask you the converse of that. How has being an entrepreneur and running your own business helped or hindered you to be a better attorney?
That's a fascinating question. So there are two things that were central to both businesses, and it's an old Jim Collins thought. So both in the legal business and in the sort of media business, the whole ability to grow and scale the practice or the media business was based on hiring, cultivating, developing great people. So sort of a very clear strategy and plan, but nothing gets done in terms of the strategy and plan without great people. So as I look at it today, day to day, the media business is ran first and foremost by a CEO of ours, Jessica Cole, The legal business, the healthcare department of McGuireWoods, is ran first and foremost by a woman named Amber Walsh. How do things complement each other? Obviously, for a very long time, the media business put me in the front and center of people that I was looking for as legal clients. About 15 years ago, that sort of transitioned to where the media business completely stood on its own and was no longer a feeder of legal business, but its own business. In terms of the media business, anytime you're a principal in something, years ago, I joined the board of a company and were granted stock, but sort of board member stock. And of course, I never really understood some of these terms that we had talked about on the law side so much. One of the terms was waterfall. So when I was granted a percentage in a company as a board member, a private equity funded company, I was so excited because I thought I owned 1%. And then, of course, when that company had an exit event, I found that my 1% was really, for all practical purposes, a 0.5% because my dollars didn't come out until the first equity of the owners came out.
Yeah.
And in terms of how one thing informs the others, you understand a lot of things as an agent, as a lawyer. And for a very long term, I practiced law very directly and was very involved in the deal terms day in, day out. As you're a principal in other things, you have a better understanding of how a lot of things play together, whether it's things like that, like, oh, I now understand waterfall more fully, my money comes after everybody else's. Or I understand how I want to contain legal cost and how I want to control my lawyers versus having them control me. There's a whole number of things that sort of complement each other in terms of knowledge base.
So how did you find juggling both your, your law career and this media company that, by all accounts, from what I've been able to see, really sort of just exploded? And I'm so impressed. I mean, I'm amazed at the people that you have that come to speak at these events. I mean, presidents and past president. I mean, it's amazing what you've been able to do with this media company. How did you find juggling both?
There's really 3 or 4 core things that sort of played into it. One is, of course, I'm now in my mid-50s, but through my 30s and 40s, I had tremendous energy for it and tremendous drive for it, and that helped. More important than the drive and energy was I surrounded myself with magnificent people and leaders. A big fan of you can't do anything by yourself. So great teams and leaders. The third and fourth points are things were, one, very synergistic, but also two, we brought very much the same core theory to both businesses. We wanted to be very niche centric and very customer centric. So in the law business, my business was wholly focused around healthcare. And then within healthcare, it was around a few specialties, surgery center chains and hospitals and health systems, and then helping private equity funds invest in healthcare. So very, very niche centric, and then very, very customer centric. The concept is you don't need 1,000 customers, you need 20 that you treat extremely well and really take care of. In the media business, a very similar type of thing. We're very focused, and we did a study on this 15 years ago when we got serious about the media business. We're very focused around 3 to 4 niches. We're going to be very deep in those niches. And it's very much the same thing. It's 200 of our customers there generate 70, 80% of the revenues. And we want to be very focused on making sure that those advertisers, those customers, those sponsors are really well taken care of. So I think it all comes back to about 3 or 4 simple concepts. Number one is great people. Number two is niche centric. And number three is very customer centric. And thus those became organizing principles, which made it a ton more manageable.
Yeah, I'm such a big believer in having a niche focus and a vertical that you really specialize in and know so well. In a previous life, I had the opportunity to be involved in a vertical, and it's amazing what you can do when you just focus your energies on moving the needle in one area. You can accomplish tremendous things.
It's much more effective as I sort of grow into like sort of the next career, the next living, and I'm still like heavily involved in the law firm, heavily involved in the media company. As I look at new efforts, new ideas, new thoughts, I keep on coming back to the narrower the better, but it takes tremendous discipline to go narrow.
Yeah, without a doubt, without a doubt. So Scott, let's move in a little bit to the M&A side of things. You've been involved in a lot of transactions, M&A transactions, buy side and sell side. And so would love to tap into some of your key learnings and key lessons. Why don't we take the buy side first? So could you talk about, and I know this is within the context of the healthcare industry, but you talk a little bit about the key lessons that you've learned, the things that you see that make the biggest difference when you're representing a buy side client in a transaction?
It's a great question, Dominic, and I think it goes back to something that we were just talking about. Throughout the course of my career, the very best acquisition people, the people that ran acquisition teams for either large health systems, large surgery center chains, large dialysis chains, large practice management affiliation groups, the people that were best at it knew the business extremely well. So they were able to assess risk relatively quickly, relatively easily, and really understand the value of what they were buying. They also were able to take that knowledge and understanding and combine it with great personal skills to have great relationship skills with whoever they're buying from, whoever they're transacting with. And it was sort of those two things to start with. They really understood the value, they really understood what they were buying, and they really had great communication and personal skills that allowed them, it's not so much to shortcut things, but to really put in perspective what counted and didn't count. And I think when I look at M&A from the buy side, it's people that are so experienced, so confident that they could deal really well with buyers because they have, or sellers, because they have clear boundaries. They have clear understandings. They understand what they're doing. They understand what they're buying. So they're not sloppy buyers. They're smart buyers. And, they also have the confidence. The other thing that I'll say is the great buyers also have such confidence with their own board or their own CEO or their own leadership that they know they could be confident in transacting deals because they're not going to be undercut up top, and they know that their board and leadership knows if they do 10 deals and two of them are bad, it's okay because they're so good at what they do. So that's sort of from the buy side. It's really understanding the business well, great communication, great personal skills, and having the confidence of your board and leadership and so forth.
Yeah, you can't hit a home run every time, right? It's impossible. There's also no perfect companies out there, so the ability to assess risk and know, where the pitfalls might lie is so important. Do you have any examples on the buy side, Scott, where you were involved in a deal and it just it hit all the marks. It was a great transaction, and and more importantly than the actual transaction, why did it go so well for that buy side client?
Sure. So it's a great question. I thought you were going the other direction. I have one that went poorly.
By the way, we'll take that as well because I think there's as much to learn from that as well, if not more.
Yeah. So periods of time I've seen go poorly are in industries where you had financial buyers getting into the industry for a first time, didn't really know the business that well, overpaid, over leveraged, and at some point things went south going forward. And there was periods of time, there were great swaths of time, and it was almost economy based, where financial buyers were the strongest buyers that were leveraging things up like crazy, and they really didn't know the businesses they were investing in that well. And that was a prescription for disaster. Things that have gone well, it's a great question. I'm trying to think of specific examples. I mean, best acquisitions are when a buyer has a clear plan for what they're doing and why they're doing it. So in certain situations, it might be that they're adding market strength that's going to have a certain value. There's a certain purpose for it. But the predominant thing I see with acquisitions that go well are the buyer has great clarity on why they're doing it and what and the purpose they're doing it for. And where they do go poorly is a situation where buyers are buying sort of because everybody else is chasing the similar types of assets, don't have really a clear plan for how they're going to execute, implement, and what the real compelling reason for the buy is.
Yeah, I just interviewed the CFO of Westel, Tom Minichiello, a bit ago, and that was a key point that he brought out, Scott, was you have to have a strategy going into these, and you have to be clear about it. Everybody on the management team's got to be bought in, and it just brings so much clarity. Once you're out in the marketplace and you start, looking at the deal flow, you can start rejecting things, very quickly and get down to the list that really matters. And so I think That point really resonates with a lot of people. Do you see on the financial side, I mean, it's a bit of a frothy M&A market. I'm interested. Do you agree with that? And are you starting to see some of that financial buyer stuff pop up again right now?
Well, certainly, it's so interesting. As I was commenting on things that I was thinking about the swath and times that deals went bad. I was really thinking back to a period from a long time ago. And of course, as I'm talking about it, I'm thinking, well, it sounds a lot like the deal environment today, which is always a little bit scary. The
Yeah.
difference I would say is, I mean, obviously, there's a tremendous amount of leverage on things. The deal environment is crazy for a whole bunch of reasons. Everybody who owns a business always has to make a decision: stay the course, sell, or some other strategy. But there's really only a few core strategies. And whenever the market is so frothy, it gets to a spot where if you own a company, you're in a position where the company's become a disproportionate part of your net worth, and you're always worried on a macro and micro level how well things will continue to go from there 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. So it makes selling very attractive. And at the same time, there's a crazy amount of private equity funded, funds that have a crazy amount of money to spend. So you do have those concerns. It does seem that in general, even though it's a high leverage environment, buyers, even on the financial side, are far more sophisticated than they were 20 years ago. And so we're hoping that lessens the chance of this kind of blow up.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. We see every day how frothy the market is, but I will say the level of sophistication seems to have gone up dramatically from 10 years ago. There's no doubt about that. So, Scott, let's move over to the sell side. Let's talk a little bit about that. What experience and key learnings can you share with the M&A Unplugged community, about, sell side transactions and, what you see makes for a good sell side transaction?
Sure. On the sell side, I'll sort of cover two different points. The first point is the most important thing is the seller. And this can be a company, it could be an individual that owns a privately held business, whatever it might be, is great clarity up front as to your goals from the transaction. What are you trying to do? Are you trying to cash out at the maximum price? Are you trying to find a partner that will help you build the business further? Or third, are you trying to avoid a debacle? And you know, those are three of the potential motivations. But the most important thing on the sell side is understanding what exactly is your purpose and what are you trying to accomplish and why so. So that's one. The second thing we tell people on the sell side is there's really three parts of a transaction. There's first, which really we just talked about, which is getting your side, your management team, your ownership team, your board all on the same page. What do we really want? What are we trying to accomplish? The second part of a transaction is getting in sync with the other side. And that might be through an auction process, it might be through individual negotiations, but really getting in sync all the way through from the starting point of a deal to all the terms of a deal with the other side and agreeing them. And then the third part of the deal is simply all the things that are needed to execute and close a deal. So we sort of look at deals, you know, the first thing is as a seller is great clarity as to what you want from the deal. The second big thing as a seller is understanding here's the three big parts of a deal: getting your own side in sync, getting in sync with the other side, and third, all the things needed to execute on a deal.
Makes perfect sense. Scott, what trends are you seeing in the healthcare M&A space? Anything in particular that really stands out over the course of the last, year to 3 years?
Well, what's really happened in the healthcare M&A side, if you go back 3 to 4 years, there's different kinds of transactional stuff that we see. First is in the hospital and health system side, that was incredibly hot, incredibly crazy for a period from about 3 years ago to 13 years back, where there's a tremendous amount of consolidation in the hospital and health system space. More currently, there's a tremendous amount of investment throughout healthcare in a lot of vehicles we saw 10, 15, 20 years ago by private equity funds. And that's sort of buying up all kinds of things. Obviously, there's been mega consolidation at sort of the CVS Aetna side and some of the big payer, big pharmaceutical side or big drugstore side, pharmacy benefit managers as well. And then you see at the more $1 million to $100 million level, a ton of practice consolidation work again, whether it's in dental and derm and radiology, in a whole set of areas, gastroenterology, around practices. So the healthcare deal market is crazily busy. And every time somebody says it's likely to slow down, it seems to find new life. So that's sort of what we're seeing. And there's different parts of the healthcare marketplace. It's a big, big part of the economy, but different pockets of it are just crazily busy.
Yeah, the practice consolidation component has really exploded. We see that from all angles. We don't get particularly involved in a lot of that practice consolidation, but we know a few folks that do it, and they are very busy at the moment.
We can imagine, exactly.
So, Scott, as an owner of a business, so let's switch out of the M&A side and let's put on the owner side. From an owner perspective, what have you learned over the years about maximizing the value of your business, and what are the best tools that you deployed to make sure that your business really was operating at, I don't want to say maximum efficiency, but maximum value, so that when you're out in the marketplace trying to get a deal done, you're going to garner the best value?
Right. And we think so much of this. We're not a believer in sort of dressing up a business for sale or doing those kinds of things. We're a believer in running a solid, great business. And that means, first and foremost, taking care of your great people to make sure your great people are excited, interested, they're paid well, they're treated well. You can't do anything without a great team. It's fundamental to everything. Everybody talks about it, but it's completely true. So that's number one. Second is we try and focus very much on where our revenues and profits coming from. And rather than try and being all things to all people, or always chasing the brand new thing, we would spend 89% of our efforts really strengthening where our revenues and profits are coming from. And this comes back to a couple of concepts we talked about. It's doubling down in the niches that are working well, and also making sure we're taking care of customers in a great way. And so I know it's not a sexy answer, but we're a big believer, if you're truly taking care of the fundamentals of your business, you're positioned well. And I think the same advice goes for anybody going through a sale process ever. We always tell any client of ours going through the sale process, we would tell ourselves the same thing, that sale processes, when you go through them, there's always X% chance that you're going to still be operating your business. And if your business goes south during a sale process, you lose all leverage with your buyers and whoever's looking at your business. You also are in a much worse spot when the process ends to actually be operating your business. So we tell everybody, if you're going through a sale process, you have to recognize you have two core jobs during that period of time. One is making sure your business keeps on getting better and better, and two, negotiating the sales process. But those are some of the things that we've always taken as very, very important concepts. One, keep your focus on running a great business, running a sound business. We're not a huge fan of dressing things up for sale. I know people go all over the board on this kind of thing, but we're a big fan of, you run a great sound business, it'll have good value. The second thing is that don't take your eye off the ball in a sales process for a million different reasons.
Those are incredibly sound pieces of advice. Scott, it's been such a pleasure to have you on the show and have you as a guest. And, I see good things happening for you, and I'm so happy to see that, because you're such a nice individual, and so happy for you. Let me ask you last question. Are there any books that you've read, whether they're business or personal books, that have really resonated with you and left, a real impression on you?
It's a great question. I mean, I grew up in a different generation, and so I feel like I'm dating myself, but there were two core concepts we always lived with. One, there was an old Jim Collins book called Good to Great, and a couple of his other books that really focused on strategy is nice, but you can't do anything without great people and a great team. And I still think a great people and a great team sort of gives you all kinds of flexibility to try all kinds of things. So big fan of that. The other core concept we always lived with, and it sort of goes to the niche-centric concept, was an old Jack Welchian book, old Jack Welch Theory, which is the concept of, you always want to be number one or two in your market, and you obviously want to define the market correctly, but you want to be one or two in your market, because in good times you do great, but then in bad times you're where customer spend goes to. So those were sort of the two of the overriding business books that left an impression with me over a long period of time. And then I can go through with you the rest of my nonfiction and fiction reading list, but I'd probably put you to sleep.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Scott, just last your podcast. How about a quick plug for your podcast? I don't know. You've been doing that now maybe 6 months or a year. Is that right?
Sure. So we've got a couple different podcasts through our main media company, Becker's Healthcare. We do podcasts around the healthcare world and healthcare business in a bunch of the different niches that we're in within healthcare. Then outside of healthcare, in a completely separate media endeavor, we're doing podcasts around really two core areas: business leadership and strategy, and women's leadership. And it's as you know, more than anything else, it's a great way to keep myself engaged and learning from people and visiting with people. And it's almost my own grad school education in visiting with people. So I'm really enjoying it tremendously.
That's great. That's great. Scott, thanks so much for being here today. Really appreciate it.
Domenic, an absolute pleasure, and I appreciate you putting me on. And hopefully you have something that you could use and you won't cut most of my answers out. But thank you.
That's awesome. So M&A Unplugged podcast community, Scott Becker brought up some awesome things today. Just to recap, if you're looking to scale your business and maximize the value of it, he pointed out a couple of key things. First, get the right people. The team really matters. There's nothing more important, in my opinion, I agree completely with Scott, than having good people in your company and then give them the reins and the freedom to go do what they do best. And understanding where you're making your money, where are you getting your profits from, maybe cutting the things that are not generating profits. And to be, own your space, be number one, number two, and really stand out as a leader. If you're switching over to the buy side, if you're looking to do buy side deals, Scott talked about strategy and how critical it is to have the right strategy before you launch a campaign and get out into the marketplace. It'll bring tremendous clarity once you start to sift through the deals, and it'll allow everybody to quickly to determine whether a deal is in or out. And to the financial buyers out there, Scott offered up a caution that it's important you understand the market and not just be throwing money at deals. Understand what the downside risks are, and maybe even bring in some consultants that can help you better understand that industry before you go put your money to work there. And on the sell side, he pointed out that really understanding what your personal objectives are as the owner of that business. Are you looking to cash out and retire and walk away, or you're looking to recapitalize the business, sell a minority stake or even a majority stake and stay on in an executive position and continue to run in the business, and to be in sync with the entire management team. And the last point that Scott made, which I think is so critically important, we've seen this a number of times in our own practice, where owners take their eyes off the ball because they engage us as an M&A firm and say, okay, we're going to sell this thing, and they've told us it's going to sell in the next year to 18 months, and all of a sudden the business starts to decline. The day you decide to sell the business, double down your efforts, work harder than ever, make sure that business is in top form so that your advisors don't have to deal with a downward trend in the middle of offering your business out on the market. So Scott really offered some tremendous insights today. All of today's information will be available in the show notes. If you would like to learn more about the process of acquiring or selling a business, please visit our website at sunacquisitions.com, or feel free to reach out to me at drinaldi@sunacquisitions.com. I look forward to seeing you again on the next episode of the M&A Unplugged podcast. And until then, please remember that scaling, acquiring, or selling a business takes time, preparation, and the proper knowledge.
Thank you for joining us today on M&A Unplugged. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and recommend it wherever you get your podcasts. If you want more great information on how to scale, acquire, or sell a business, please visit our website at sunacquisitions.com.